Nobody saw this coming. Because what started as just another headline about TY's son has now exploded into something way darker, way messier, and way more personal than anybody expected. King Harris is suddenly at the center of a storm involving arrests, old warnings, body cam footage, family humiliation, social media backlash, and now one terrifying question that has the entire internet divided. Is this the moment everything finally falls apart? Because this is not just about one traffic stop. This is not just about one court issue. And this is definitely not just another celebrity kid acting out for attention. According to the conversation now blowing up online, this is the result of years of chaos, years of public confrontations, years of reckless choices, and warning after warning from the one person who knew exactly where this road could lead. His own father. And that is what makes this story hit so hard. I did not just predict trouble. He practically described it before it ever happened. He warned that if King kept moving the way he was moving, prison was not a possibility. It was inevitable. At the time, people thought he was just being a tough father, but now, with old charges resurfacing, a bench warrant, a gun discovery during a traffic stop, viral body cam footage, and the internet screaming about a possible sentence. Those words are coming back in the most chilling way possible. But here is where this gets even crazier. Just when it looked like King Harris might slow down, become a father, and finally change direction, the drama got louder. The choices got riskier. The headlines got uglier. And then family beef, rap feuds, and public embarrassment pushed this situation into a whole new level of chaos. So what really happened? Was this the final consequence of a spiral everyone saw coming? Or is there an even bigger twist hiding behind the headlines? Because once you see the full timeline, the warning signs, and the moment everything snapped, you might never look at the Harris family the same way again. Before the headlines, before the body cam footage, before the internet started screaming goodbye forever, King Harris was supposed to be something very different. He was supposed to be the next chapter of one of hip-hop's most famous families. Born Clifford Joseph Harris III, King came into the world already carrying a name that meant something in the music industry. His father, T.I., wasn't just another rapper trying to make it. He was the man once crowned the King of the South, a Grammy-winning artist whose music defined an entire era of Atlanta hip-hop. And his mother, Tamika "Tiny" Harris, was already a legend in her own right, part of the R&B group Xscape, and a major presence in entertainment long before King was even born. From the outside looking in, King Harris was living a life most people could only imagine. Luxury homes, expensive cars, private schools, celebrity parties, cameras following the family everywhere they went. Millions of fans watching their lives unfold through reality television shows like T.I. and Tiny, The Family Hustle and its follow-up, T.I. and Tiny, Friends and Family Hustle. For most kids, childhood happens quietly. But King grew up with cameras in his face and strangers commenting on his life before he was even old enough to understand what fame meant. And that kind of environment can do something strange to a person, because while the world saw a rich celebrity kid growing up in luxury, inside the Harris household there was something else happening too. Something most people didn't notice at first. Pressure. Enormous pressure. Think about it. Imagine growing up knowing your father is one of the most respected rappers in hip-hop history. Imagine hearing people constantly compare you to him. Imagine every decision you make getting judged by millions of strangers online. For some people, that pressure becomes motivation, but for others, it becomes rebellion. And according to people who followed King Harris closely, that rebellion started showing itself early. At first, it looked harmless. Just a teenager acting tough online, posting aggressive messages, trying to prove he wasn't just a celebrity kid, trying to show the world he could stand on his own. But over time, the tone started changing. King wasn't just talking anymore. He was building an entire image around being rebellious, confrontational, and street-connected. And the internet noticed immediately. Fans began asking the same question again and again. why would someone born into wealth choose this path? Because King Harris wasn't just experimenting with music, he was experimenting with a persona. Around 2020, he began releasing music under the stage name Kid Sion, dropping trap-influenced tracks and melodic hip-hop singles. He followed that up with his EP, A Thin Line Between a King and a Playa. The title itself felt almost symbolic. A thin line. A thin line between royalty and recklessness. And if you look back now, that title almost feels like a warning. At first, people supported him. Fans were curious to see if he could follow in his father's footsteps. He appeared on shows like Wild 'N Out, gaining attention and building his own following. But then the headlines started changing. Instead of talking about music, they started talking about confrontations. One of the earliest viral moments came from a video showing King arguing in a parking lot. The clip spread across social media within hours. At first, people laughed it off as teenage drama, but it didn't stop there. Soon another video surfaced, this time involving an argument with a fast food employee. Again, the internet reacted. Again, the footage went viral. And every time something like this happened, the same conversation returned. Why is this kid trying so hard to prove something? Some people blamed the pressure of growing up famous. Others blamed the culture of social media, where controversy spreads faster than success. But the person who understood the situation better than anyone else was King's father. Because T.I. had already lived through this exact story. Long before King was born, T.I. himself had faced serious legal trouble. Arrests, federal weapons charges, prison time, public embarrassment, a career nearly destroyed before it even fully began. He knew the road King was walking down, and he knew exactly where it ended. That's why, in a moment that now feels almost prophetic, T.I. said something during an Instagram live that people are replaying all over the internet today. He looked directly into the camera and said something brutally honest about his son. If King kept moving the way he was moving, prison was inevitable, not possible, not likely, inevitable. And the reason that statement hit so hard is because it wasn't coming from a critic. It wasn't coming from a journalist, it wasn't coming from a stranger online, it was coming from a father who had already lived that life. He wasn't guessing, he was recognizing a pattern, and that pattern kept getting worse. Because by the time King reached his late teenage years, the confrontations weren't just arguments anymore, they were becoming part of his public identity. There was the now famous Waffle House fight in Atlanta. There were videos showing heated arguments in public spaces. There were social media posts celebrating arrests like they were badges of honor instead of warnings. Every new incident added another layer to the narrative forming around him. A narrative that looked nothing like the life he had been born into. And eventually, something happened that made the situation impossible to ignore. King Harris was arrested. At first, the charge sounded almost ridiculous, a seatbelt violation. Something most people would pay a small ticket for and move on from. But what shocked people wasn't the charge. It was the reaction. Instead of showing embarrassment or regret, King jumped onto social media and celebrated his release like it was some kind of victory. Posting messages about minor setbacks and major comebacks. For some fans, that moment felt like a turning point. Not because of the arrest itself, but because of what it revealed. It revealed a young man who didn't seem worried about consequences. And if you listen carefully to the timeline that followed, that moment might have been the first sign that something much bigger was coming, because the incidents kept piling up. Arguments, public feuds, confrontations with family members streamed live on Instagram. Tensions that spilled out of private conversations and into the public eye. And slowly, the questions surrounding King Harris changed. At first, people asked why he was acting this way. Now they were asking something far more serious. Was anyone able to stop him? Because behind the scenes, T.I. had already tried everything. Advice, punishment, warnings, public confrontations. But according to him, there eventually came a point where nothing seemed to work anymore. And when a father reaches that point, when he admits there is nothing left he can say to change the situation, that's when things become truly dangerous. Because what happened next didn't just create another headline, It triggered the moment that would send King Harris straight into the biggest legal crisis of his life. And once that moment happened, everything changed. And then, the moment finally arrived that changed everything. Because up until that point, all the chaos surrounding King Harris had still lived in the world of arguments, viral videos, and social media drama. People debated his behavior online. Fans criticized his attitude, and his father kept warning that the path he was on would only end one way. But for a long time, those warnings were still just that. Warnings. Until one night in October 2024, when a simple moment behind the wheel of a car suddenly turned into the biggest legal disaster of King Harris's life. It started in a quiet area of Dunwoody, Georgia. According to police reports, King Harris was driving a BMW and pulling out of a gas station when something happened that immediately caught the attention of a nearby police officer. Investigators say King pulled out directly in front of the officer's patrol vehicle, nearly colliding with it. In most situations, something like that leads to a basic traffic stop, but this one quickly turned into something much bigger. The officer activated his lights and pulled the BMW over. And from the moment he approached the vehicle, the situation escalated. According to the official incident report, the officer immediately noticed the strong odor of marijuana coming from inside the car. That alone was enough to raise suspicion. But what the officer saw next made the situation far more serious. King Harris had a gun on his hip, right there in plain view. In that moment, everything changed. The officer calmly instructed King to place his hands on the steering wheel while he assessed the situation. And according to body camera footage released later, King complied without resistance. He stayed calm, followed instructions, and did not attempt to argue with the officer. But what the officer discovered next revealed something that made the entire situation much worse. When police ran King's information through their system, they discovered something alarming. There was an outstanding warrant for his arrest. This wasn't a new charge, and it was connected to an older case that had been quietly building in the background for months. Back in 2022, King Harris had been charged with several serious driving-related offenses: speeding, driving on a suspended license, and driving under the influence of drugs. Instead of resolving the case, authorities say King failed to appear in court, which automatically triggered a bench warrant for his arrest. For a long time, that warrant remained active. And according to investigators, King had continued living his life as if it didn't exist. Until that traffic stop. Standing beside the car that night, the officer realized he was not just dealing with a routine traffic violation. He was now dealing with a suspect carrying a firearm, while also having an active warrant connected to a previous criminal case. King Harris was placed under arrest. Young body camera footage later showed the exact moment the officer carefully removed the firearm from King's hip, secured it, and placed him in handcuffs. 2 other people were inside the vehicle at the time, but King was the only person taken into custody. He was escorted to the patrol car, searched, and transported to DeKalb County Jail. For a moment, it looked like this arrest might quietly pass through the system, like so many celebrity incidents before it. But what happened next made sure that wouldn't happen. Because the body cam footage leaked online, and once that footage began spreading across social media, the story exploded. The video showed the entire encounter, the moment the officer approached the car, the discovery of the weapon, the arrest, and King Harris sitting in the back of the patrol vehicle looking visibly frustrated. Not scared, not apologetic, frustrated. That detail did not go unnoticed by the internet. Within hours, clips of the footage were circulating everywhere. YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Comment sections filled up with thousands of reactions, and the narrative around King Harris began shifting in a way that felt far more serious than any previous controversy. Some viewers were sympathetic. They pointed out that King had cooperated with officers and didn't resist arrest. Others argued that the situation showed exactly what his father had been warning about for years. But there was one detail that really made the entire situation feel like a ticking time bomb. Just weeks before the arrest, King had publicly stated something during an Instagram Live. "I don't even own a gun." Those words were now being replayed, next to footage showing a firearm being removed from his hip during the traffic stop. For critics online, that contradiction became the centerpiece of the entire controversy. The story was suddenly everywhere. News outlets picked it up. Bloggers dissected the timeline. Fans dug through King's old social media posts, searching for clues about what might have led to this moment. And the more people looked at the timeline, the worse it seemed. Because the arrest wasn't just about one mistake, it was about a pattern. The parking lot confrontation, the Waffle House fight, the viral arguments, the suspended license, the DUI charges, the failure to appear in court, and now, a gun discovered during a traffic stop. Every piece of the story started fitting together like a puzzle. And then suddenly the warning T I had given years earlier began circulating online again. If he keeps this up, prison is inevitable. People were now asking a question that no one wanted to answer. Was this the moment that prediction finally came true? But just when the story seemed like it had reached its peak, a second twist dropped that made everything even more explosive. Because the legal consequences were only the beginning. While King Harris was dealing with the fallout from his arrest, another controversy was already brewing behind the scenes. One that would drag him directly into one of the most unpredictable rap feuds in the industry. A feud involving one of the most ruthless figures in hip-hop. A man famous for destroying careers with a single Instagram post, 50 Cent. And the moment King Harris decided to jump into that war, the entire situation exploded into something nobody could control anymore. Just when it seemed like King Harris was already dealing with enough problems, the situation exploded into something nobody expected. Because while the legal drama surrounding his arrest was still circulating across the internet, King made a decision that would push the entire story into an even more dangerous direction. He stepped directly into a war with 50 Cent. And if you know anything about hip-hop history, you already know that is not a battle most people walk away from easily. The feud actually started between T.I. and 50 Cent. For years, tension had quietly existed between the two rap legends. It mostly revolved around a proposed Versus battle, as a popular online music showdown series where legendary artists face off by playing their biggest hits. T.I. had openly said he wanted the battle. He believed his catalog was strong enough to go head-to-head with 50 Cent. But according to T.I., the battle never happened because 50 Cent backed out. At first, it was just playful jabs, comments on podcasts, small insults thrown during interviews. The kind of rivalry hip-hop fans love to watch unfold. But everything changed during Super Bowl weekend in 2026. That's when the feud suddenly reignited. T.I. once again called out 50 Cent publicly, accusing him of ducking the Versus battle. The comments started spreading across social media, and fans began debating who would actually win in a music showdown. But 50 Cent didn't respond with music. He responded the way he always does, each with social media trolling. And this time, the target wasn't T.I., it was Tamika Tiny Harris. 50 Cent posted a photo of Tiny on Instagram with a mocking caption that instantly ignited outrage among the Harris family's supporters. Within minutes, the comment sections exploded. Fans argued, memes spread, and the tension between the two camps suddenly became much more personal. But what happened next is what turned the situation into a full-blown explosion. Because King Harris decided to respond, and he didn't respond quietly. Instead, he jumped onto Instagram and began unleashing a series of posts directed straight at 50 Cent. At first, the posts were typical rap beef insults. King accused 50 of having a history of feuds, referenced past controversies, and mocked the rapper's reputation. But then things crossed a line that shocked even longtime hip-hop fans. King posted an image referencing 50 Cent's late mother, Sabrina Jackson. The post showed a tombstone with her name engraved on it. The caption was even more disturbing. He wrote a message telling 50 Cent to dig up your mama. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Even in a culture where rap beefs can get extremely disrespectful, many fans felt that targeting someone's deceased mother crossed a line that should never be crossed. But King Harris didn't stop there. Soon after the post went viral, he appeared wearing a t-shirt featuring the image of 50 Cent's late mother printed across the front. For many observers, that moment was when the situation truly spiraled out of control. The backlash came instantly. Social media erupted with criticism, debate, and disbelief. Like some fans defended King, arguing he was simply defending his mother after 50 Cent mocked Tiny online. But many others felt he had taken things way too far. And perhaps the most shocking reaction came from someone very close to King, his own father. T.I. himself later admitted that even he felt the situation had crossed a line. In interviews, he explained that when he saw the t-shirt with 50 Cent's mother printed on it, he immediately told his son to stop. "That's enough," T.I. reportedly said. For a man known for brutal rap beefs himself, that statement carried serious weight, because T.I. understood something King might not have realized yet. 50 Cent doesn't fight battles the way most rappers do. He doesn't always respond with music. He responds with humiliation. And if there is one thing 50 Cent has built a reputation for, it's destroying opponents using nothing but social media. But what happened next shocked everyone watching, because instead of launching into a full-scale attack on King Harris, 50 Cent laughed, literally. He posted a simple meme on Instagram featuring a cartoon frog and captioned it with one word: LOL. That was it. No diss track, no long rant, no angry response, just a meme. For some people, that response was even worse than an attack. It suggested that 50 Cent didn't even see King Harris as a serious opponent. He wasn't worth the energy. The internet immediately began dissecting the moment. Fans debated whether King had embarrassed himself by escalating the feud so aggressively. Others wondered if 50 Cent was simply waiting for the right moment to strike back. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. While the internet was focused on the rap feud, the legal issues surrounding King Harris were still quietly building in the background. And then reports began appearing across social media that sent shockwaves through the entire conversation. Posts began circulating claiming that King Harris was facing a possible 5-year prison sentence. The rumors spread like wildfire. TikTok videos, Facebook posts, YouTube thumbnails screaming, "Goodbye forever." Suddenly, the narrative shifted again. This wasn't just about rap beefs anymore. This was about the possibility that the son of one of hip-hop's biggest stars might actually be heading to prison. Fans started asking questions. Was the sentence real? Had a judge already made a decision? Was T.I. trying to intervene behind the scenes? No one seemed to have a clear answer. But the rumors were enough to create a full-blown internet frenzy. And as the debate exploded online, one thing became painfully clear. The situation surrounding King Harris had gone far beyond music, beyond social media drama, and beyond family arguments. This was now a story about legacy. A father who fought his way out of the streets and built an empire. And a son who seemed to be walking directly back into the same chaos his father had spent decades trying to escape. And as the story continued spreading across the internet, the public reaction became more intense than anyone expected, because the internet was no longer just watching. The internet was judging. Once the rumors of a possible sentence began circulating online, the situation surrounding King Harris exploded in a way no one expected. Within hours, the internet turned into a battlefield of opinions. Every major hip-hop blog picked up the story. TikTok creators began posting breakdown videos. Twitter threads started dissecting every moment of King's past behavior. Comment sections filled with thousands of messages from fans, critics, and people who had been watching the Harris family for years. And the reactions were brutal. Some people were sympathetic. They pointed out that growing up as the child of two celebrities comes with enormous pressure. Every mistake becomes public. Every argument becomes content. Every bad decision gets replayed 1,000 times online. But a much louder group of people saw things very differently. To them, King Harris represented something frustrating. A young man born into opportunity who seemed determined to throw it away. And posts started trending with comments like, "People would kill to have the life he was born into." "How do you grow up rich and still try to act like you're in the streets?" "He's trying too hard to prove something." And the most common comment of all, T.I. warned him. Those three words became a theme repeated across the internet because people began sharing old clips of T.I. speaking about his son years earlier. In those videos, T.I. wasn't defending King or making excuses for him. Instead, he spoke with a kind of brutal honesty that shocked many viewers. He admitted that he saw his younger self in his son, and he admitted that he already knew how that story usually ended. If he keeps moving like that, prison is inevitable. Now those words were being reposted everywhere. On TikTok, two creators stitched together videos showing King Harris's timeline, the Waffle House incident, the social media arguments, the traffic stop, the firearm discovery, the bench warrant. Each clip stacked on top of the next until the narrative became impossible to ignore. To many viewers, it looked like a slow-motion disaster that had been building for years. Even some voices inside the hip-hop community began weighing in. Industry commentators started debating whether King Harris had been trying too hard to create a street image in order to gain credibility as a rapper. Because in hip-hop culture, authenticity matters. But critics argued that King's situation was different. He wasn't someone trying to escape poverty. He wasn't someone coming from struggle. He was the son of two successful entertainers with access to resources most artists could only dream of. And that contradiction became the center of the conversation. Was King Harris chasing an image that didn't belong to him? Or was he simply trying to escape the shadow of his father? Meanwhile, the Harris family itself remained mostly silent as the controversy spread. Tameka "Tiny" Harris had defended her son in the past, often pushing back against critics online. But during this wave of headlines, she stayed unusually quiet. That silence only fueled more speculation. Fans wondered if the family was dealing with the situation privately behind the scenes. Others wondered if the situation had simply become too complicated to address publicly. Then there was the reaction from the other side of the feud, when it came to 50 Cent, and the response was exactly what many people expected. Mockery. 50 Cent has built an entire online persona around trolling his rivals. And while he didn't directly escalate the feud with King Harris, his reactions made it clear that he was watching the situation unfold with amusement. The meme he posted, simply captioned LOL, spread almost as fast as the original controversy itself. To many viewers, that moment summed up the imbalance between the two sides. One man was a veteran of decades of rap battles and business success. The other was a 19-year-old struggling to build his own identity. But the reactions didn't stop with fans and celebrities. Media outlets also began discussing a much deeper question. What happens when the children of famous rappers try to build careers in the same industry? And because King Harris wasn't the first rapper's son to face public scrutiny. And he likely won't be the last. The pressure to live up to a parent's legacy can be enormous. Every move gets compared to the previous generation. Every mistake becomes a headline. And in King Harris's case, the comparisons were especially intense. His father had already walked the path of legal trouble, public humiliation, and eventual redemption. T.I. had served time, rebuilt his career, and turned his life into a success story. Now people were asking whether King would follow that same path of redemption, or whether he would repeat the mistakes without ever reaching the comeback. And as the debate grew louder, one phrase began appearing everywhere. Goodbye forever. At first it appeared in dramatic YouTube titles. Yet then it started showing up in comment sections. Then it spread across social media discussions. People were using it to describe what they believed might be happening to King Harris's future. A goodbye not just to freedom, but to the potential life he could have had. And that is what made the situation feel so tragic to many observers. Because despite all the controversy, one thing remained true. King Harris was still incredibly young. He was still at the beginning of his story. But if the rumors about sentencing turned out to be true, that story might take a direction nobody wanted to see. And just when the internet thought it had already seen the worst of the drama, one final twist appeared that made the entire situation even more complicated. Because behind all the headlines, behind the rap beef, and behind the legal trouble, there was another life now involved in the story. A brand new life. King Harris had just become a father. And suddenly the questions surrounding him changed once again. Because the internet was no longer asking whether King Harris would change. They were asking something even more serious. Would becoming a father finally force him to, or was the damage already done? Just when the entire internet thought the King Harris story couldn't get any more complicated, a new detail surfaced that completely changed the emotional weight of everything. Because while the headlines were screaming about arrests, feuds, and possible prison time, something else had quietly happened in King's life. He had just become a father. And suddenly the narrative wasn't just about a reckless young rapper anymore. But now there was a child involved. A brand new generation of the Harris family. In November 2024, King Harris announced the birth of his son in a post that quickly went viral. The message was simple but symbolic. "Welcome, King Jr. Time to take over." With those words, a third generation of the Clifford Harris name entered the world. For a brief moment, fans hoped this might be the turning point. Because throughout history, becoming a parent has changed the direction of countless lives. It forces people to grow up faster. It forces them to think about the future instead of just the moment. And many people believed this might finally be the moment that made King Harris slow down. Even T.I. seemed to hint at that possibility. When he spoke about becoming a grandfather again, he mixed humor with a warning in classic T.I. fashion. He joked that he planned to raise his grandson in a way that would torture King the same way King tortured him growing up. It sounded like a joke, but underneath the humor was something deeper. A father who had already lived through prison, fame, and redemption, watching his own son walk dangerously close to the same mistakes. The irony of the situation was impossible to ignore. Years earlier, T.I. had been the one sitting in a jail cell, trying to figure out how to rebuild his life after legal trouble nearly destroyed everything he had built. He paid the price for those mistakes with federal prison time, house arrest, and years of rebuilding his reputation. But he eventually turned that struggle into a comeback story. Albums went platinum. Businesses flourished. Reality shows turned his family into a household name. And he transformed from a troubled rapper into a successful entrepreneur and cultural figure. Now, decades later, he was watching his son face the exact same crossroads. And the most painful part for him might be the realization that he saw it coming long before anyone else did. Back in 2022, when King was still a teenager arguing with strangers online and getting into public confrontations, T.I. had already issued a warning that sounded harsh at the time. "If he keeps this up, prison is inevitable." Those words are now echoing louder than ever, because when people look at the timeline surrounding King Harris, the pattern feels almost impossible to deny. It started small. A confrontation here. A viral argument there. Then came the Waffle House fight. Then came the traffic violations. Then came the suspended license. Then the failure to appear in court. Then the arrest involving a firearm during a traffic stop. Then the rap beef with 50 Cent that escalated into one of the most shocking moments of disrespect fans had seen in years. Each event felt like another step deeper into chaos. And the most heartbreaking part of the story is that the exits were always there. The warnings were there, the support was there, the resources were there. Few young artists have ever had the level of guidance that King Harris had access to. But sometimes the hardest thing in life isn't having the opportunity to change. It's choosing to take it. Right now, the internet is watching the situation unfold like a slow-motion cliffhanger. Some people believe the reports about a possible sentence are exaggerated. Others believe the legal consequences are only just beginning. And in the middle of all that speculation stands a 20-year-old rapper with a newborn son, a famous last name, and a reputation that has already become one of the most controversial stories in hip-hop. The real question isn't just about the legal outcome anymore. It's about the future. Will King Harris follow the same road his father walked, one filled with mistakes, consequences, and eventually redemption? Or will he repeat the worst parts of that history without ever reaching the comeback? Because the truth is, this story isn't finished, not even close. The legal process is still unfolding, the internet is still watching, And the next chapter of King Harris's life could go in two completely different directions. One road leads to growth, responsibility, and proving everyone wrong. Yet the other road leads exactly where his father warned it would. And right now, nobody knows which path he's about to choose. But one thing is certain, the entire hip-hop world is watching to see what happens next. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think King Harris is simply a young man making mistakes while growing up in the spotlight? Or do you think the pattern we're seeing is heading somewhere much darker? Because a lot of fans believe this situation has already reached the point of no return. Others think King still has time to turn everything around, especially now that he's a father. Drop your opinion in the comments. Do you believe King Harris will eventually follow the redemption path that his father T.I. walked? Or do you think this story is heading toward a much more tragic ending? Also, let me know something else. Was King wrong for escalating the feud with 50 Cent? Or was he simply defending his family the way he felt he had to? Because that debate is dividing the hip-hop community right now. And if you want more deep dive stories like this, where we break down the drama, the hidden timelines, and the moments the internet missed, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because, trust me, this story isn't over yet. New updates could drop at any moment, and when they do, you're definitely going to want to hear what happens next.